Hi, this is Mary, your holistic recovery coach. Today I want to talk about two things, the term known as relapse and a term known as having a slip. So slip versus relapse. What does each mean? What's the difference? Why does this language matter? And what's most important to take away from all of this? Okay, so first let's talk about relapse. Probably the most common known term in terms of addiction recovery, or relapse being essentially picking up a drink or a drug after a period of sobriety. So someone gets into recovery, stops using drugs and alcohol, continues on that path for some length of time, whether it's weeks, months, or years. And then after that period of time, at some point, pick up a drink or a drug again and go back into that active addictive process, that active addictive daily life. So that is a relapse. That's pretty commonly known, right? A slip. What is a slip? Well, what's interesting, first of all, is that relapse, by definition, the origin of the word comes from a Latin term that basically means literally to slip back. So relapse means to slip back, or I think in the earliest time periods, it meant to slip back into wrongdoing, okay, doing something wrong. So that's the origin of the word relapse. Literally, it means to slip back into something negative, right? So what does slip mean then? Well, generally speaking, it's a term used in addiction recovery. Relapse you've probably heard of more often, but slip, you might, depending on who you talk to, you might hear that word used more frequently because it's a pretty commonly used term, and people refer to it. Basically, it's like a relapse, but that's a much more brief period of time. So a very brief relapse, a brief period of time where, again, there was a length of sobriety and then someone picks up, and then, but in the case of a slip, people usually come back in it very quickly. In other words, come to their senses quickly. It could even be just one episode of picking up a drink or a drug, and then they come to their senses within even 24 hours, perhaps, and go right back to getting honest in their recovery program and process. And that, when someone has a slip like that, that can be an opportunity, actually. A very, very brief period of going back to using a substance, abusing a substance, that can actually be helpful in some cases for people, from the standpoint of, obviously it's better if you don't, but if they were lucky enough to have it be so brief and to make it back, and to choose to return to their program of recovery, whatever that looks like for them. If they do that, then they can actually return with a stronger kind of resolve and more determination to work on themselves and their program, because, basically it kind of perhaps scared them enough, or, basically made them wake up to the fact that there was something that they were either, doing they should have been doing, or I think more frequently, something they weren't doing that they needed to be doing, that made them vulnerable to actually doing that, and slipping, having a slip, what made them vulnerable to picking up again. So I would say that a slip is something that is brief. Can a slip then, however, there's a few different scenarios where that can land. So like I just described, it can be quick and someone comes back to the program, back to whatever their recovery program is, or it could progress instead into a full-blown relapse. How does that happen? Well, I mean, it's not really a slip if it's just they pick up and then they're off to the races, so to speak. And in a full-blown relapse, then it was never really a slip, I guess, right? By definition. But sometimes people come back from a slip, and then, like I said, they could either get honest, you kind of wake them up and to a new level of awareness that there's more work to be done, or something needs to be done differently than they had been doing. Or they could come back from the slip, and this is where perhaps the language is important. It's more about the intention behind the language, the energy behind the word slip. where it can be kind of controversial in some circles, whether to use that term at all. It's if they don't take the slip seriously, right? So maybe they come right back, but perhaps the person is not really fully taking responsibility for the fact that they consciously made the decision to pick up that substance again. Maybe they're somehow minimizing their part in that, or minimizing the fact that it happened at all. And so that's where it can be kind of like, well, it was just a slip, right? So if someone's saying, oh, I had a slip, and oh my gosh, it scared the heck out of me, and now I need to, tell me what to do. I need to do something different, and I don't want that to happen again. And thank God I made it back. There's that kind of energy around a slip. And then, like I was just describing, there's also the potential for, okay, maybe you physically come back and show up and say, yeah, I had a slip. Or even worse, you don't, and you keep it to yourself, and you keep it as a secret. Then if there's that lack of honesty and full responsibility around it, even though the individual can come back and show up, and maybe they go to meetings and they show up at their meetings, and they even they can tell on themselves about it. But if they're still kind of coming from a place of some lack of responsibility around it, that's what's troubling. And that's where it can end up being a series of slips, which, can, again, each time it's like, if you're lucky enough to make it back, fantastic, but you can easily slip into a relapse, and then you never know whether the person's going to make it back or not. So slips are serious, albeit, brief in duration by this kind of commonly accepted definition. The controversy, potential controversy around that term. And, like I mentioned, in some circles, I can remember someone once saying, you slip on a banana peel, right? Like it's an accident. Like the word slip often, in every other context I can think of, you slip on the ice, you slip on a banana peel, you slip. It's like, it's something that just happens to you, right? By accident, through no, perhaps you shouldn't have been walking on the ice, perhaps you should have been paying attention to the banana peel on the floor, but it's not like, it's still like, no one's going to say like, oh, it's completely your responsibility that happened, right? So that's where the word slip, again, it's some people discourage using that term. So, because it can sound a little more casual, it can sound a little bit more like, it could potentially slip into the realm of like that victim energy, something happened to me, not, I participated in it. And, victim energy is the energy of active addiction, or, and dry alcoholism and that type of thing that leads us, in the opposite direction of recovery and growth and well-being. So, again, that's the concern sometimes with using that language, but I really think that it's about the intention behind it. And lastly, I think, well, what's most important, right, is so someone has a slip, it can either progress into a relapse, that's a whole different thing, that's a whole different danger, and or they can come back and get really, really honest and learn from it, and use it to their benefit. And maybe help others as a result too, because they've got that experience now that they can share with others, so other people can hopefully avoid that scenario and those consequences. Or they can come back and not fully really take responsibility and not learn from it. So what's most important, I believe, in this discussion is about the fact that it's not really about the language that you use. It's about the actions that you take and what you learn from it. So it doesn't matter what you call what you did, I mean, it does if you're using the language to kind of try to get out of something or minimize it, right? But what really matters is, okay, you had some period of sobriety, you went back to a drink or a drug. What did you learn from that? Why did that happen? Okay, and that might not be an immediate aha, you know what happened. Actually, chances are you need to work with someone else to help discover that, and and find out, again, like, what can you do differently so that you can avoid that in the future and move forward and continue to recover and enjoy a healthy, happy sobriety, a healthy, happy recovery. And lastly, there's The other thing that comes up on this topic sometimes is when people come back from a slip, sometimes they get tripped up and, does now I have to change my sobriety date and I have to count days again, or don't I? And what, and all these different things. And again, I mean, it's just like recovery is an individual journey. That's an individual's decision on, how they choose to do all that, and what they want to label things, and how they want to count their recovery, how they want to, count, or what do I want to say? How they want to count their sobriety date or their recovery date, and their journey. If they mark it with time period, like many people do, that can be a sensitive topic, and especially it can get a little bit complicated and tricky for some people too. And if they relapsed or slipped on something that they didn't use in the past, or that was different than their kind of drug of choice. And anyway, that is something that why it's really important, when whatever your recovery path is, whatever you do for your recovery, if you've had a slip, it's really important that you work with someone and who can help guide you how to make use of that, and kind of keep the lesson and let go of the rest, let go of the shame, guilt, remorse, anything involved with that, because it's hard enough for people to to accept recovery, to make that leap from that surrender, but that leap from active using into starting the recovery process. And to go back, to slip back at any point in the journey can be really challenging, and create a new type of guilt, shame, and remorse that can make it even harder to kind of get back at it. So that's what we want to avoid. Honesty is pretty much the key here, since this is a disease of denial. And that's where we just want to be careful, because the other piece in that kind of, if you're counting days again, or, how are you defining what happened? Was it a relapse or a slip? All that matters is that you don't pick up again, and that you learn from it and move forward. That at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Everything else is, kind of semantics, and you'll work that out as you go. But what's most important is having the ability to be honest, and not what you label it, but what you do about it. That's the point. What's important is not what you call that lapse in your sobriety, but what are you going to do about it? Okay. So I think that's about all I had to say on that topic. Again, slip versus relapse, taking responsibility, and the language that we use can be pretty powerful. So thank you for being here for this discussion. Please add a comment below if you'd like to add anything from your own experience, or questions, comments, thoughts that came up. And I'll put some resources in the description, as always, and how to get in touch with me. And I wish you well on your next 24 hours. Thanks.